Our devotion this morning is based on Matthew chapter 16, starting at verse 21. And it writes, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, Far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you. But Jesus turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan, you are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of men. One of the things the disciples consistently messed up on was knowing who Jesus was and what he was really there to do. And in that way, not a whole lot has changed. The question I guess I'd have you consider this morning is, how do you read the Gospels? When you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, in your head as you're sorting them by genre, how do you read them? Would you look for them in the biography section? I know a lot of times we probably would look for them there, but they're not biographies, not in the sense that we tend to think of. It's maddening, actually, when you read through the Gospels, the information that's not there. We have just tantalizingly little glimpses of Jesus' earthly life. It all focuses on his adulthood. So the Gospels, they're not biographies. But they're also not self-help books either, and this tends to be the other way. I think we're tempted to read the Gospels. We read them and say to ourselves, what would Jesus do? Or we look at our lives and we say, well, what would Jesus do in this situation? And we thumb through the Gospels trying to figure out some idea of how Jesus would have us live or react according to the situations that we face. But the Gospels aren't meant to be self-help books either. If you want to know what the Gospels are really all about, you should look at them through the eyes of a mathematician. And it sounds odd coming from me because math is one of the furthest subjects from the subjects that I love. But when you consider the Gospels according to mathematicians, what you see is pretty remarkable. When you look at the percentages of the Gospels and what they are about, each and every one of them focuses on the last week, just the last week of Jesus' life, this week that we're in right now, Holy Week. A third of the Gospel of Matthew focuses on this last week. A third of the Gospel of Mark focuses on this last week. A quarter of the Gospel of Luke focuses on this last week. And nearly one half of John's Gospel focuses on this last week of Jesus' life between Palm Sunday and Easter morning. The math is literally shouting, pay attention, because what happens this week is supremely important. And what do we find in this last week in Jesus' life? We see him ride in triumphantly to Jerusalem on the back of a donkey to shouts of Hosanna. We see him dine with his disciples as they celebrate the Passover meal together, the Last Supper, and Jesus' institution of what we know as the Lord's Supper. We see Jesus arrested that night, handed over to Pontius Pilate, sentenced to death on a cross. And then 3 days later, on Easter morning, this incredibly surprising, shocking, and wonderful news that Jesus, who is dead, is now alive. Have a great day.